The board met last week. Just wanted to let you know we all formulated and approved our annual budget. And we budgeted for almost everything that we normally do to happen. Whether it happens or not, who knows? But the money's in the budget for it. And with CDC's latest recommendations this week, I'm hopeful that maybe we'll be getting back to some sort of normalcy this summer. Maybe we can get back to putting on our things that we do. Even maybe have a live chapter meeting. Maybe the next meeting will be in person. I don't know, but that'd be wonderful. So I'd like to also point out that in the newsletter, we decided to put a condensed version of the board of directors minutes in it. So hopefully the chapter members, if they're interested, they can read that and see what we've been up to. I don't think I have any other announcements. Does any committee chairman have anything to add before we start the program? Okay, no. Well, listen, we got three wonderful speakers tonight, and we're going to lead off with Bob Hamel, whom I've never met. I'm going to ask Bill to introduce, since they're good buddies. And what we'll do is have each speaker talk for 15, 20 minutes, followed by about 10 minutes or so of questions. We'll follow after Bob with Alex Townsend and finish with Jason Willis. So let's get on with it. This is going to be fun. Bill, you want to talk about Bob for 2 seconds and bring him in?
Yeah, no, I'm real happy to introduce Bob. He and I started guiding about the same time, I think around 1979. And Bobby was mostly here over on the Arkansas, and I was more on the western slope. But he's ran and owned Arkansas River Tours for many years, and now he's the executive director of the Arkansas River Outfitters Association, our professional outfitters association. He's also the chair of the AHRA Citizens Task Force, and through that, he also attends all of the AHRA RAC meetings, the Rationing and Agreement Advisory Committee for AHRA. He's the vice chair of the Arkansas River Roundtable and the chair of the Environment River or the Rec Committee, and also chair of the Arkansas River Water Forum and on that board of directors. And we've had that water forum, I think, a couple of times here in Salida, but it kind of bounces all over the state, depending, or at least this part of the state where Arkansas water is important. But he knows a lot about water in the Arkansas and in general, and I think he and can enlighten us in a variety of ways. And he's also a good fisherman and a member of our chamber.
All right.
And a member of our TU chapter is what I meant to say.
Cool.
Thanks, Bill. And as Bill mentioned, I do attend a lot of meetings and sit on a lot of boards. And I guess I do interact with several TU members on some of those boards. So I don't want to be redundant and touch on things that you guys might already get updates on. But I try to think about what is important to the fishery and to anglers in general, and try to focus more on those kinds of things. And definitely this should be interactive, because I know if you're like me and you sit on a lot of Zooms, it's easy to get lulled to sleep. So hopefully I won't do that and keep it entertaining and not entertaining as much as informative. So anyway, I guess the one thing that I know you guys are always interested in with water is the VFMP, and I'll try not to be acronym heavy here. As you know, the water world is very acronym heavy, but the voluntary flow management plan, we just signed a new 5-year agreement. And what's been really cool about the last couple signings is, after many years of a lot of battles on every time we try to renew this program, it's taken a lot of effort, and it's been contentious at times. But right now it's a short meeting. Everybody's in agreement. Everybody sees the value. And so there's been virtually no changes. Some things that we are learning with the VFMP is just a little bit of the emphasis that maybe the emphasis has changed a little bit on some of the numbers that we recommend to the Bureau of Reclamation as far as flows. And as you guys probably know, or if you don't know, the flows on the Arkansas, we try to make sure that the flows stay pretty low for the emergence of the brown trout fry in the spring. And that's intentional. That's something that the Bureau works really hard at trying to keep flows down. And so the emergence of the fry can happen without dealing with high flows. And it looks like that will happen again this year. They do think that they will have to move a little bit of water starting April 1st through June 1st, like 50 CFS to 100 CFS, as they try to make room for import water. And import water is the water that comes from the West Slope through for the Fry Arc project. And this year's first prediction, which I thought was interesting that they were already willing to make an early prediction, but given the snowpack, they still were thinking there's going to be 45,000 acre feet in transit and being moved over from the West Slope. And out of that, we do expect to have a full complement of 10,000 acre feet for the flow program, which is the first target that we look for when we try to supplement those flows from July 1st to August 15th every year for the boating flows. And so with that being said, that's really not too bad. The snowpack's not in great shape. As you guys know, we all live here. We look at the mountains. Who knows what this storm coming? It looks like it's snowing out of my window right now on the Sangres, but it may be a front range southern storm. We don't know yet. So we'll see how this all pans out. But along those lines, the other thing that that I would talk to you guys about the VFMP is the late flows. In July and August, we've been getting some pretty good help from Pueblo Waterworks is really engaged with us in understanding when the most optimum time is to move water. And I think this has been a testament for a lot of people's work, hard work and collaboration over the years to work together with water. And they understand that supplementing, not just supplementing, actually moving water they already own during that prime time of July 1st to August 15th really helps us out. And last year, you know, they moved about 10,000 acre feet to match 10,000 acre feet, which allowed it to be a pretty good boating season all in all. And I don't think it's just about boating when we talk about those flows, because I think those flows, 700, I personally don't think is detrimental to the fishery. I think it helps to keep the water cool. And as someone who float fishes as much as I walk wade, I would rather float fish at 700 than 300 or 200. So it does seem like the cooperation from the water entities like Pueblo has really helped us and with their understanding. And I think more and more we're seeing that in the future with other entities like Colorado Springs Utilities and Aurora, and everybody who has water here understands the value to the economics and to just the well-being of the river communities that, you know, going from Canyon City, Salida, BV, even Leadville. So it's worked out really well. The other thing that seems to be more of a target, or it has been in the past, and it doesn't seem that it's that important anymore. And I think this is something maybe Alex can touch on as he gets kind of dialed into the system here and the, you know, the philosophy of the fishery biologists, especially with Mike and Greg Poliski, who he's taken their place. You know, in the past, it was, we want to keep water and we need to be able to keep the flows at 250. Well, if you guys remember the drought years of 2002 and 12, Greg Poliski doing some analytical work, and the data was showing that the fishery was doing just fine, even at low flows. And so now the 250 number isn't even really that important to anybody anymore. Nobody's really talking about it. Nobody's really worried about it. And I just think we keep it in the back of our mind with climate change, just in case at some point, we have to deal with the heat stress that potentially could happen on the Arkansas, but didn't happen in 2002 or 12. So I don't know if that's going to change. I'm sure it's something you guys probably think about or talk about, but it's definitely a concern of mine as we think about water for fish in the future. And so anyway, that's what I have on the VFMP. Does anybody have any questions about VFMP type topics? Nothing? You guys get well dialed in. Okay.
Hey, Bobby, this is Reed.
Yes, Reed.
As far as turn it in. As far as problems with climate change, has there been any discussion about working about lowering the 700 number to a lower agreeable number on if things get worse, which we don't know if and when they're going to get worse, but I know there's been several years where everybody thinks that you're always getting 700 CFS, but that hasn't been the case. So I'm just wondering if there's been any discussion about, because everything you're seeing now, like when you see a snowpack of 100%, that used to mean that they could predict the flows pretty good, but now they realize that 100% isn't what it used to be because the climate's warmer and it's hotter and it's drier, so that amount of snow is not making it to the river. So I'm just curious if you guys have discussed anything like that.
It's a good question because you touch on a couple of things that I think are very critical right now. One is soil moisture content. It's a real concern that whatever snowpack we have, all of it might not make it to the river because the soil is so dry because we did not even have a monsoon last summer. It's just not raining. We're in this 20-year drought and the predictions are not for much better situations. To address the point on the 600, yes, I didn't mention that, but the target is usually 700 CFS and we try to get as close as we can. But I will tell you in the last few years with my involvement with it, starting with Rob White, the park manager, and then Tom Waters, who is definitely an ally. If you guys don't know Tom, you do need to get him, maybe get him to talk to you guys sometime, introduce himself. But Tom is awesome. He's really, he's well informed. He wants to learn more. He's really open and he does grasp the situation here. And he and I and Rob and I before that, in years when we know we're not going to make it for 700, if we have to start on July 1st, we have pretty much daily conversations about how do you want to adjust the flows. And Rob and I get the last time we did it was 2018. I mean, we were making minor adjustments, asking the Bureau to make the adjustments of, 15, 20, 25 CFS, which in the angling world, it's not really that critical, but in a boating situation, it means whether one trip can go in one of the same itineraries, like Browns Canyon half days from Fisherman's Bridge to Hecla Junction. I mean, 25 CFS can make a difference of being able to go or not on a half-day trip there, to be able to turn 2 trips in a day. So very, very critical to the boating scene. And so yeah, it's a math problem of, you got so many CFS or so many acre feet and you do the math and you make the adjustments. But Reed, we definitely do not want to put it out there that we want 600 to be the target, even though it has become the target sometimes later in the flow program timeframe. And as you know, the flow program works great when you have to augment only about 25 CFS or something for a couple of weeks. But if you have to start on July 1st and augment 100 CFS, that's 200 acre feet. You burn it up pretty quick. And so you know that we do talk about it. We don't want it to be the target, to make it the target all the time, only as needed. And the same goes with the 10,000 acre feet. And you know this, because I think you've helped I know you helped with pulling that out of the archives of the Southeastern Water Conservancy District's board notes that 10,000 was supposed to be a target when you look at how much water you have to see Can we get any more to try to make it to 700 or whatever? Then all of a sudden, 10,000 got to be like a locked in number of like, that's the target. And I, carrying the ball after you, have definitely carried that baton with the message of, 10,000 is only the target that we want to start looking at and making sure that that is all we have and we can't get more. Jim Broderick, who's the executive director of Southeastern Water Conservancy District, has worked some pretty good magic at times of finding other water with the entities that he works with there. And there have been years when we've moved a lot more water, as you know, Reed. So yeah, anything else on that?
Hey, Bob, this is Bill. You try mind also explain how that 100% or the 100% of normal, how that changes, over a factor of time. I can't remember if it's every 10 or 20 years, but they change how the averaging goes. So when we're in a 20-year drought like this, 100% of snowpack is no longer what it was previously. Yeah,
that's a good point. Some things that are happening with measurements of snow, but yes, that is a snapshot. Even on our last VFMP meeting, Ellen Ward from Pueblo, jokingly made the point that because I made the point of looking at Ivanhoe Snowtail site, which is one of the ones we look at for the collection basin, which is where the water is above the frying pan river. And he made the point to saying it seems like Ivanhoe's always over 100%, and it's kind of interesting. So yes, there has to be a reset, and I'm not sure exactly how many years go by that they have to do the reset and the re-averaging. And a couple things about snowtails in measurements. We in the boating community, and just because you guys are interested in flows, but we look at certain snowtail sites give us a better message than looking at what you hear from the entity, the water community that throws out the numbers. Like April 1st has always been a big one in the past. There's always a big Front Range newspaper story. And on April 1st, and they tell you what the snowpack is statewide, basin-wide, but we drill down even further because the snowtail sites that we look at, Bromley, Fremont, are way upstream, and then Porphyry Creek's on the other side of Monarch, but it's a good indicator for both the Gunnison and the Arkansas. And but it tells us a little bit about what's happening on the Monarch Ridge. And then we look at Ivanhoe and Independence Pass, which are also good indicators of upstream in Ivanhoe, particularly about the catch basin on the other side, the collection basin. And so those are the ones we look at. And several of the other sites, some of them are in the southern Sangres. In some years, there's hardly any snow, and they bring down the average. So we don't really look at those. We kind of do our own averaging in the boating community. And for you guys interested in flows on the river, yeah, you don't really need to pay attention to like Whiskey Creek and a Pishapaw and, sites downstream. Some other sites that we have, you kind of have to know what you're looking at to see if there's really an average there, because like South Colony Lake, South Colony and Hayden Pass don't really have enough history to give you averages. So you'll see that there's not an average sometimes for those in the Sangres. So yeah, where else were we going with that? Oh, it's snowtails. There is some other technology called LiDAR, which is something that has been used as a test in a few places in Colorado. It's actually aircraft flying over, and they shoot LiDAR into the snowpack, but they could take a shot and then come back and take another shot and calibrate the difference between the photos and the LiDAR that they take. And it's something that's going to come to the Arkansas. And what it can do is in a flyover, they can actually measure snow in some of the big snow fields. As you know, as we get later into May or even late April, when the angle of the sun changes on those snowpacks, that's when runoff is coming. Runoff comes when runoff comes, pretty much with the changing angle of the sun on those high snowpacks. And when we look at those, you know, we're not getting good measurements from snowtail sites late in the season, because if anybody's ever been to any snowtail sites, some of them end up in the sun. They try to do them in protected windproof kind of areas, but once the changing angle of the sun hits, all bets are off on some of the snowtail sites. So LiDAR might be coming to, or I think it is going to come to us. And Bill was mentioning the water forum. One of the topics that we were going to have last year in 2020 in April, you know, we were going to be in Salida, was from those guys that that operate that system and that technology. So I'm hoping for our next live forum meeting, which will be in Salida next year, 2022, that we will have that as one of our topics. So yeah, some things are changing. Snowtails alone are not good enough anymore. There's just too much that needs to be considered with places other than the snapshot that the snowtails give us. Does that answer the question?
Say, Bob, did you notice the graph yesterday in the Mountain Mail newspaper, and it listed the snowpack of all the basins in Colorado? Who puts that out? Where do those numbers come from?
I didn't see the Mountain Mail, so I don't know whose did they use. Does anybody else know the answer to that?
It lists.
I'll go get a paper and be right back.
Okay.
Well, I've got it here, but it doesn't say. It just lists, you know, the 10 major basins. Lists Arkansas at
Usually the state.
90% of
It looks
median.
at us. Yeah, I would say that that's relatively close. But see, like the boating community, I think the angling community, you would want to look at what we look at, because, you know, the average could get pushed way up or way down. Think about this storm that is coming. If it is going to be a southeastern Colorado kind of storm, these are the storms that sometimes can dump 2, 3, even 4 feet on places like Rye. And that's down by where Whiskey Creek and Apishapaw are down in the southern Sangres, that can push that average. And it's sort of like, it's to a point where it might not give you a good accurate of what you think the snowpack is going to do here. The other thing, well, people are trying to figure out that newspaper. You know, the other thing you look at too is talking to people who get into the backcountry on snowmobiles or backcountry skiers. Sometimes some of the people around here that have been around a long time, they have a really good feel that we kind of throw into the mix of making those calculations. So relying on the whole basin snowtail average, not very good for the angling interest, I don't think. Did you guys find that paper?
Yeah, it's the NRCS, and I can't remember what the acronym stands for.
And it lists our current reservoir storage for the Arkansas Basin at only 67%. That was one of the lowest of all listed. I was a little concerned when I saw that. That low number. 94 was the number last year. For 67.
Is that lumping all the reservoirs together?
It just says Arkansas Basin 67. So
see, again, that's lumping in, and what you want to see, it doesn't matter that the upper reservoirs get drawn down to make room for the import water, right? I mean, remember, Turquoise and Twin Lakes are about the Fry Arc project. Pueblo owns Clear Creek. So when you look at the reservoirs, they do have to be drawn down to make it work. What is also a consideration these last couple of years is Pueblo. Pueblo has lost something like 20,000 acre feet in storage room just from siltation. And so there's some cause of concern there where they actually would like to go in and, you know, maybe remediate that situation. But Pueblo has come to the point of almost spilling in the spring. And, you know, that's a situation that I don't think is going to happen this year. It almost happened the last couple of years. But the entities involved that have the water owners, managers have figured out not to have that happen, but that's just, seems like a crime to have water downstream that's spilling, and it's like, we really could use it. And John Martin is extremely, extremely low levels right now. I do know that. So I don't know if that 67 is including John Martin, because John Martin alone could draw down all those other reservoirs. So it's
So it's
more
the National
important.
Resources Conservation Services is what NRCS stands for.
Yes.
Well,
The other thing about that, Rick, is that's 94% of average, and it would depend a lot on what kind of snowpack we had early. And I think we had early snowpack last year and then not so much late.
let's hope this storm coming up is that 2 to 3 feet they're talking about. We really need it. That'd be wonderful. Let it snow.
If you guys want, I put a link to the NRCS website in the chat, and you can go there and you can check the snowpack and the reservoir storage throughout the whole state.
Okay. Good suggestion. All right, we're coming up on Bob's time. Is there any more questions for him? This was interesting. Is that a no? Okay, well, Bob, thanks so much.
Bet.
Learned a lot. Good info. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Absolutely.
Alrighty, Alex, you're next. So let's see if we can figure out how to hook you up with Pam and share. And none of us have met you yet, Alex, but I know you want to start off with introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about you.
Sure.
Can't say that. So go ahead and let's go ahead and take over.
Let's see if I can't get this screen sharing right. Can you guys all hear
Hey.
me okay?
It's working. Awesome. I can see.
Let me put this in presenter mode.
That's that wonderful brown trout that we're all curious where the heck that big boy came from.
How does that look? Does that fill up the screen now for the slide sharing?
Yes.
All right, good deal. Thanks. Just want to say thank you guys for having me here tonight. I appreciate it. And I know that Mike and Greg Palicki in the past have both worked with this chapter of TU as far as sampling, stocking fish, pack plants, all sorts of different collaborative efforts. Yeah, I definitely want to keep that trend going. I know that's important in this area, and I know it's important to you guys to have involvement with your local aquatic biologist. So I will try and be as open to communication and transparent as possible with everything I'm doing. And you know, when I get some schedules in concrete, I can also share with you a sampling schedule, and you know, when I'm looking for volunteers and things like that. But yeah, we can talk about that in a little bit. I threw up my contact information here on this slide for you. In case anyone wants to jot that down, please feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email at any time if you have questions, concerns, want to talk about fishing or just swap fish stories. I'm open to any of that. So try not to be too long on some of these slides, just give you a brief background to my history and you know how I came to be where I'm at right now. I'm a native Coloradan. I grew up on the Front Range. And my family was really always kind of into outdoor adventure and outdoor recreation. We actually spent quite a bit of time in the upper Arkansas drainage, whether it was camping, rafting, hunting, hiking, or definitely lots of fishing. And that was always a part of my childhood, and that's kind of what got me involved in fish and fisheries in general. I'd always been curious about aquatics and about fish, and I really just had a knack for fishing as a child, whether it was warm water fishing, bass, or you know, walleye or fly fishing in the high mountain lakes and streams. Sorry, go back. I forgot to tell you guys, if you want to know, that's North Delaney brown trout. So they grow them big. They grow them big up there in North Park. I've had the pleasure of spawning fish up there for a couple of years now, and I've seen some real monster fish. But hopefully hopefully we can get some fish in the Arkansas looking like that as well. Oh, sorry, I skipped a few slides. So about myself, I'm married. My wife and I, Melissa, we have 2 kids, William and Owen. They're 2 and 7 years old. They definitely keep us busy, full of energy. And Owen is my little fishing partner. He has great fishing luck. I don't know what it is about him. Anytime I take him out ice fishing, he seems to do just as well as anyone there, if not better. So, really excited to have these 2 helping me out in the field in years to come. As a young man, I originally went to college and I studied business at the University of Colorado in Boulder. And I studied business marketing and management. I went into the field and I worked for about 6 or 7 years in big telecom, doing sales management and sales marketing. And I was very, very unhappy with my choice in career. And I was always felt pent up and wanted to do everything I could to get outside and get away from the job. So after my wife finished her education, she encouraged me to go back to school and to kind of pursue something that I found worthwhile and that I really wanted to commit to for the rest of my life. So I looked up fisheries programs and natural resource management programs. I thought this would be a great way to work outdoors and to get hands-on with the resource that I love. And I discovered Colorado State University had a real nice fisheries biology program there. So I started that, and I finished my undergrad work there. And I turned around, and about a year later, I went back and started a graduate school program there. I had such a good experience there and was very involved with the CSU communities. I was part of the American Fisheries Society as a president and aquarium curator. And I wanted to continue my grad work there. So as a grad student, I secured funding through Colorado Parks and Wildlife and Pete Cadmus, who works at the toxicology lab up in Fort Collins through Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And we researched the effects of maternally transferred selenium on fish reproduction in Colorado. And we did some food web modeling and work with selenium in Colorado. Now, specifically, we were looking at brown trout, as the literature and the science has kind of shown that they are pretty highly sensitive to selenium, and its dietary exposure, and it's maternally transferred through egg yolk proteins to the sac fry. And as the sac fry absorb the selenium, they'll exhibit some negative effects, including deformities and low survival rates and poor hatch success. So cool thing is I got to go around the state with Colorado Parks and Wildlife and sample all over the place, anywhere I think I could find good populations of brown trout that I could perform wild spawn takes on and bring the eggs back to the lab. We had this pretty cool egg rearing setup back at the lab where we reared all these brown trout eggs all the way through sac fry and eye-up stages. And then we assessed them for the physical impairments I was talking about, and we looked at their deformity rates and tried to assess that with the selenium levels that were in the parent fish tissues. And so we kind of went along and we looked at these different metrics of deformities in the fish, and we scored them. We even had some really off-the-wall deformities. Here's a kind of a cool looking one I took a picture of a shared yolk sac. And we kind of ranked that in there. And I also told you we looked at selenium and its movement through various food webs. And we took a look at selenium concentrations in different levels of the food web in the water, in the particulate matter, which is like the sediment and the periphyte and the growth on the rocks and the algal growth and things like that. And we took a look at selenium in invertebrate and then in fish. And we kind of modeled how the selenium moved through the aquatic food webs in Colorado compared to what the Environmental Protection Agency had come up with in their selenium criteria and documents. And we found that Colorado was kind of a vastly different system. And, you know, I can go on and on about the science and get into graphics, and certainly I'd be happy to do that with anyone further in detail too, to go over some of the analysis if they find it interesting. But we found that, you know, I think overall the EPA has a pretty good model, and that looking at selenium in terms of the standards they propose really seems to be protective of brown trout and aquatic life in Colorado, especially since brown trout seem to be one of the most sensitive species. Now, not to say the whole grad school project was easy. There were definitely sets of setbacks and complications. You know, these are just a few fun ones. We obviously dealt with lots of different aquatic things like snapping turtles in your trap nets. They can be extremely difficult to remove. Wild snakes, and funny, oddly enough, I had 3 raccoons get stuck in my trap nets one night. So that was kind of an interesting thing to take care of in the morning. So it was a really unique experience at Colorado State University. I think I gained a really good perspective on aquatic systems and their movements of toxicants through them. And also I gained a ton of sampling experience throughout the state. I just wanted to throw up this slide from one of my exit seminar presentations, and just note that my previous involvement with Trout Unlimited in grad school extends to both the Cutthroat chapter and the Rocky Mountain Flycasters chapter on the Front Range, who were both awesome and had donated quite a bit of money to scholarships for my research. So just to throw that a note out there, that I've definitely had some good interactions with Trout Unlimited in the past, and I'm really happy that you guys have chosen interest in my projects.
Awesome.
After graduation, I'm still kind of working on a couple of the reports. I'd say right now we're trying to write some manuscripts for publication from that. But for the last 2 years, I've been working for Colorado Parks and Wildlife as an aquatic technician in the Northeast region for our native species biologist, Boyd Wright, and our sport fish biologist, Kyle Batigi and Ben Swiggle up there. And in that time, I've had, you know, some awesome experiences, everything from raft shocking down the Colorado River to sampling fish for walleye spawn, which we're getting ready to go take care of in Pueblo here in a couple days. We're going to start on Monday, actually, hopefully, if this snow allows us to. But it also let me get my hands on some awesome salmonids throughout the state as well. Some very beautiful trout. A couple specimens here from the Poudre River up there. Nice brown trout. That one's out of Wolford Mountain Reservoir. We got to do some grayling spawn projects. This is up on Poudre Canyon Pass there. And we had a whole big operation set up there for 2 days where we took grayling eggs, and that was a lot of fun. Fly fishing during the front end of the grayling spawn there at Joe Wright Reservoir. A lot of fun experiences, some awesome backcountry camping. As you can see here, this is the spawning channel above Joe Wright on the left, and then on the right here, this is Zimmerman Lake. We did a wild spawn take of greenback cutthroat trout this year, and it ended up blizzarding on us during our whole spawn take operation. So made for some really cool pictures and some interesting work up there at Zimmerman Lake, working with some awesome, beautiful greenback cutthroat trout. So here's an example right there of a pure Bear Creek strain from Zimmerman Lake, and here's a nice big brooder as well. So some really awesome, beautiful fish. Fun working up there. Very hard fishing though, and that's one difficult lake to fish. So if you hook up to a nice fish like this in there, you should definitely feel pretty lucky. And later in the season, as a technician for CPW, we performed wild spawn take operations at North Delaney Lake. This is another one of those big North Delaney brown trout. We're hoping to grow them like this in the Arkansas. And this was a really phenomenal year last year for egg take on North Delaney. We set a record in the first day of most fish spawned and most eggs taken ever in Colorado, at least history that we've noted. So we had a phenomenal set of weather conditions and water degree days that kind of led up to that spawn, and kind of the perfect storm that we pulled off there, one of the best in Colorado. Not only did I work with, species, but aquatic species, we all did some boreal toad conservation work up there. And I know this will be a part of my work in the Arkansas Basin too, especially working with reclamations. some of the green lineage Hayden Creek cutthroat fish that we have, and trying to get those fish spread throughout the Arkansas Basin so they're not susceptible to single catastrophic events like forest fire, things like that. So I know we have some habitat that's really good for those Hayden Creek cutthroats. It's also good boreal toad habitat. So I'll be kind of looking at these guys as well along the way. And I just kind of wanted to throw up a last slide here and maybe propose some projects and collaborations with Trout Unlimited. You know, again, I'm just getting my feet wet here in the first few weeks of the job, so it's really going to take a while to get to you know, understand what's going on. But you know, based on, you know, what's happened in the past, and you know what, you know, types of things you guys have collaborated with CPW on, this seems like a really good list that we could move forward with. I know that annually you guys have been helping us out for the past few years with fin clipping on Gunnison River rainbow trout. And unfortunately, due to COVID and a few other issues in the area, we just weren't able to make that happen this year. But I have been looking out for some future fin clipping events, because getting those Gunnison River rainbow trouts in the Arkansas seems to be a high priority. And we really want to see if this population of kind of WD resistant trout can establish a foothold in there. And it looks like, you know, from years of a couple anecdotal snips of data that I've seen from Greg and Mike, that these fish are taking a hold, and they do show some good growth rates. So I want to continue some stocking, and we'll definitely do some future fin clipping on these fish. Another thing that, you know, I wanted to help collaborate, or, you know, offer to help have you guys help collaborate with, is some backpack shocking in some of our high mountain lakes and streams, and also some big river work on the Arkansas. I've got a load of work to do this year. It seems like I'm kind of you know, jumping in both feet in the deep end, but I'm really excited about it. And another thing that I had considered too was, I know in the past that you had done some with Greg Palicki before Mike, some pack plants in some of our high mountain lakes and streams with some greenback cutthroats. And I'd also possibly think about getting some Hayden Creek green lineage cutthroat fish moved around, doing some pack plants around this year as well. And then, you know, kind of along the lines with the Hayden Creek cutthroat fish, we're also looking at, in the next 3 to 4 to 5 years, a few different possible reclamation projects in the area to get some streams reclaimed, probably some brook trout moved out, and to make some new habitat for some of these Hayden Creek green lineage cutthroat. And of course, you know, I'm open to any suggestions you guys have, or any collaborations, or, you know, events, things like that. You know, it sounds like a great idea to me. Then we'll hop in and we'll do it. And kind of with that, I'll throw one more fish picture in there. This one was a sneaky one. We caught this one right in downtown Fort Collins, underneath that bridge there on the Poudre River. So there's big fish everywhere. You just got to find them. And you know, I'm happy to answer any questions, or you know, chat for a while, whatever you guys like, and whatever we have time for.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Alex. I've got a question on the Hayden Creek cuts. Is Hayden Creek, or do you know enough about how that got blown out with the fire 4 years back now? Or is that creek ready for reintroduction, if it hasn't already, with any species of trout, if you know?
Yeah, I don't think we're planting anything back in there yet. And I'd have to go take a look at it and see what the area looks like. I know that was a pretty severe burn up there.
It was, yeah, a lot of damage, probably too early.
Yeah, unfortunately, it might be too early given the circumstances. But you know, it's quite an amazing story that they went in, sorry, excuse me, and rescued those fish in between fire lines, and you know, in the middle of a forest fire, and brought them to the Roaring Judy isolation. And now we have a really decent looking broodstock population of these Hayden Creek fish that are getting big enough to start getting out this year. I know we're looking at a couple stocking options, trying to find some area that might be fishless, or possibly even some high mountain lakes that may have winter killed. There's some theories kind of going around that I've talked with Josh Nearing, who's the senior aquatic biologist in the region, looking at growth rates of these fish in a lake and reservoir environment over a stream environment. And that actually might show really promising that they kind of well adapt to that type of an environment. So I don't know about putting them back in Hidden Creek, but I know there's 3 or 4 other systems that we are going to be stocking throughout the
Reintroduction
area.
of beavers.
I think Newland Creek and Cottonwood
Okay,
are
that's fine.
getting the Hayden Creek cuts back again this year as well.
Albert,
Hey,
you wanna
Alex,
keep on the same-
This is
Or would you
Reed
want to
Dills
experiment?
up in Buena Vista. We've been looking at 4 Mile Creek, which is a small tributary north of town, and used to have a lot of beaver. We have no beaver left, and it's also it's high. I think it'd be great to get some more beaver back in the entire length of the stream, but on the upper end, there is there used to be a large boreal toad population, but I think they've been negatively affected by the loss of beaver dams too. So I'd like to see some help from Parks and Wildlife on getting those beavers reintroduced.
Hi, Reed. Nice to meet you. Thanks for that one. That's actually something I had not heard about. I did know there was some. I don't know if there's remnant boreal toad populations up there still, but that might be a good one I can go take a look at this year and at least kind of survey, do some presence, absence shocking, and see what kind of fish populations and what the habitat looks like up there. And search for any recent beaver activity. I appreciate the heads up.
Alex, this is Larry, and a comment on that. I did some class work with schools and Parks and Wildlife some years ago. And one of the things with beavers, I think a lot of it is habitat, and they move around quite a bit, don't they? When they start losing their basis of food supply, and they just kind of migrate off someplace else, and it may be 10, 20 years down the road, they just start coming back when there's a food supply going. Can you comment on that? Is that true?
Yeah, I think that definitely is a plausible explanation there. So it may be, kind of a circular thing to where it is based upon food supply and resources for them in that area. I don't know if it has to do with illegal take or anyone, killing beavers too. I know that can be issues too as well. That, I can talk to the DWM in the area too, to ask him if there's any kind of issues with that, or he had any thoughts on that as well. I know there are also some possibility for like maybe some beaver dam type of analogs that could be installed, to help kind of supplement that habitat that they support.
Yeah, I would like to.
Alex, Chris Dirksen, could I ask you a question?
Sure, Chris.
Alex, in my professional career, I was a land use attorney and environmental attorney, did a lot of work with local governments on wildlife habitat preservation. In fact, worked with Tom Hobbs, who you may run across at CSU. We collaborated on a number of efforts. I'm giving a presentation at a conference coming up in a couple of weeks on what the entomologists are calling the insect Armageddon, the die-off of insects, not only in the US, but around the world. Due to climate change, pesticides, development, destroying their habitat. And what caught my eye on doing the background work for this presentation was the demise of mayflies in the upper Midwest. About 50% decline in mayflies, which is the big trout fly up there in the Midwest. I wonder if you have any thoughts or any information on the trends on insects. If we lose the mayflies, if we lose the caddis, it's going to have a terrific impact on our fishing. And the statistics you see from around the US are really cataclysmic about the loss of insects.
Mhm.
Do you have any information, or are you guys going to be looking at the insect population in the Arkansas and the streams in the valley?
Thanks, Chris. That's one thing I have a particular interest with too. Kind of to go back and make a note about my grad school, I was co-advised by Dr. Chris Myrick there, who's kind of the physiology and aquaculture guy, and also by Will Clements, who runs the ecotoxicology lab up there. And Will has been working with the Arkansas for 30 plus years now, looking specifically at invertebrate populations after mining effluent remediation. And I think that at least for the Arkansas, as a snapshot over the past 30 years, he's seen some drastic improvement now that we have water quality treatment on some of these point sources of mining effluent. But I definitely see a lot of it kind of scares me, the things you talk about too, the overall decline in insect diversity and kind of biomass throughout all these aquatic regions. So I think that's important. But I actually do have access to some awesome long-term data sets on the Arkansas. And, that might be a good thing for a future presentation to TU to kind of like maybe go over some of that invertebrate data, because that's extremely healthy for the extremely important for the health of that fishery.
Well, and the progress that, because of you all and many others and the chapter here that may have been made over the past couple of decades. When I started fishing here in the late 80s, it was, you were lucky to catch a trout over 15 inches because of pollution. So a lot of progress, and boy, I'd sure hate to see it regress now, but you're certainly seeing it everywhere else in the country.
Yeah, it's kind of that, it seems like it might be a slow, steady decline across the country. And, the Arkansas, the past 30 years was well below that curve. And now with all the remediation work and the treatment that's been done, kind of bringing us up to that curve. And we might start to see some of that decline as well, loss of abundance and speciation.
Well, one thing that really disturbed me is I've seen some recent studies on the South Arkansas, which has been severely damaged by development. There's been development up and down the South Arkansas, a major tributary of the Ark. And those studies showed pretty conclusively that it was destruction of the habitat and insect habitat that was, and siltation that could be a major issue. So I hope we keep an eye on that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one to note. Especially looking there and then downstream of where the Hayden Creek fire came into. And I don't know how much more siltation is going to move out of that system within the next few years too, as well.
Thank you.
Along those lines, back in the 80s, probably Reed remembers this and Chris as well, but we used to have a pretty decent stonefly, Pteronarcis hatch on the Arkansas. And then it just kind of went away sort of in those mid 80s and has never come back. And I think there was an effort at one point to reintroduce them, bringing in a lot of eggs and stuff from the upper Colorado. Do you know if you're going to try to continue with that or what the status of that is?
I'm not too sure what the status of that was. I think that was something Greg started doing, if I'm not mistaken.
That was one of his pet projects.
Right. And I don't know if Mike had continued that on or not. You guys might even have a better knowledge of that.
Greg Poliski decided it wasn't worth it.
He just wasn't seeing any kind of return on prior sampling events or anything like that.
Virtually no return of insects.
Well, I'll have to say, this is Chris Dirksen again. I'll have to say, I think in the last 5 to 6 years, this is totally anecdotal, but I'm seeing stoneflies again, and that's been one of my go-to flies this winter. So I mean, they're there, and again, it's purely anecdotal from my piscatorial research on the stream.
Well, and I've looked through some of Greg's sampling reports, and I've seen notes that he's made about about stonefly terranarcis, observations here and there. So like you said, I know there's probably patches of them. Whether or not transplantation is going to work, that might be up in the air. That might be something, a good side project throughout the next few years. And I can also sit and talk with Greg about some of this stuff too. I've had a couple meetings with him that have been, fairly quick, but, some afternoon when I'm down in Salida, I'd love to sit down with him and pick his brain just about, quite a few things that he managed in the area and things that he did too. So.
Alex, where do you live? Are you up in VV or you're not in Salida?
I'm actually up in Fort Collins right now. My wife and my family and I we're looking for a place to move down in Salida. We're gonna have to probably rent for a year and then sell our house up here, and then look for something we'd like down there. So it's a tough market right now. Boy, man, the housing is not cheap down there, and even trying to find rentals, it's pretty hard.
Yeah, it is tough here. Well, I guess I won't ask you how you like Salida. That was my next question. But
I love Salida.
terrible.
Every time I'm there, it's fantastic. The weather is generally better than Fort Collins usually. So, but we're planning to be down there. At least for me, I need to be down there kind of on a permanent basis. Starting late April, early May, because I've got technicians starting June, and we're going to be picking up doing some lake and reservoir sampling.
So, Alex, you're looking to rent something then, a house? What do you?
Yeah, ideally, we'd like to find a nice 3-4 bedroom place for us down there. Rent for a year, and then we'll probably maybe rent our place here in Fort Collins for a year and then sell it, and then look to buy something down there.
Okay, chapter. We need to find Alex a place to live.
There you go. Yeah, if you guys have any good leads on rental properties, definitely drop me a line.
Okay.
Well, Alex, I would recommend you also take a look at Buena Vista. It's not that far to Salida from here.
Yeah, true, and it seems a little more affordable from my research as well.
What about Seguchi?
What?
Seguchi? I called it that once when I first started traveling down that way, and my my fellow fish biologist promptly corrected me.
I'm just trying to be funny, but actually, it's much more affordable just over in that valley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
All right, Alex. Any other questions from anyone? Hey, listen, this was great fun. It was wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and telling us a little bit about you. And I found it interesting that a couple chapters helped you out scholarship wise or financing wise. That's wonderful for our fellow TU chapters.
They were fantastic. They were some of the biggest, kind of private donors to my whole graduate school experience. So really grateful for the help those two chapters have given me there.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the area when you get here, and we hope that soon. And anything we can do, of course, just all you have to do is shout out. We're there for you. We're looking for projects. We've got the manpower. We're here. We want to do it. And I think some of us are especially interested in backpack plants. This younger, stronger ones of us, whom I have no idea who that would be in our club, but
good thing is we set aside those first few reaches of backpack plants for everybody, so they're not too hard to get to.
There you go. Lower elevation,
Exactly.
less than 1 mile. All righty, Alex, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Alex.
All right, thanks for having me, guys.
All righty. Okay, that leads us to our third speaker. Jason, are you out there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Rick.
Okay.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, good. Everyone knows our TU local AML Project Manager, mining reclamation manager who lives here in Salida. And I don't think you've talked to us for, gosh, the last time I saw you was at a meeting at the boathouse 5 years ago. Have you? You've certainly talked to us since then, haven't you?
I think it was been a couple, 2-3 years ago, and then, you know, inadvertently around then.
Okay, good. Well, you need no introduction. We all know you. Tell us about what you've been doing this year. Other than, I got to lead off. It was wonderful. You shot down the that Aura Vista mine application with the Forest Service. As we all know, or maybe some of you don't, Jason wrote and his team wrote a 3 to 4 page list of things that they had to meet to get the application. And that applicant just, after he read all that, just probably, I would guess he thought, there's no way in heck I can do all this. So that killed that dredging operation in the Arkansas River up by the Numbers area north of BV. So that was a great March 2020 effort that I am aware of. So tell us what else you've been up to. I'll turn it over to you, Jason.
Thanks, Rick. And I'm definitely not going to have as many nice fish photos as Alex. You probably should have had me go before. I'm going to talk about all kind of boring legal stuff, but just to kind of connect the dots on a couple of things that were brought up. Hayden Pass, there has been some work done there. There was EWP funds, emergency watershed protection funds, that were put out to bid a couple years ago, and they did do some work on that Cottonwood Creek zone, kind of lower down with a couple property owners. And then I've been talking to Luke Javernick from River Science out in Canyon City about doing some reclamation, restoration of the streams up above where a lot of the private property is. If we could get Forest on board to do some of that in the future, there might be some opportunities. And Luke has done some process-based restoration out there in Cottonwood Creek. So there has been a little bit of work out there, and hopefully there's more to come because it is a very affected watershed. But I mean, other than that, if Pam, could you let me share my screen somehow?
Let me see how I can do that. Let me get on to.
Go to the participant list. Go to the participant list.
I had it marked for share all, so let me, Alex.
Jason, do you see it at the bottom of your screen? Like next to mute and stop video and all that?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, it just popped up.
I see it. Good.
Okay. So
there you go.
Everybody sees that?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Alex.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure, no problem.
So Rick asked me, I think he saw this, but he asked me to come and basically give the presentation I gave to the Environmental Law Institute back in February. Trout Unlimited was asked to come speak at a webinar for the ELI in DC to showcase restoring abandoned mines, Good Samaritans, and risky policy. And since TU is one of the leading industry experts for doing good SAM cleanups, we were asked to come and speak, and I had to bring my outside counsel in because it was just me and a bunch of lawyers. So I felt a little weird. An engineer and a bunch of lawyers it's not a good scenario for me. So no, but all joking aside, it was a good experience. So we'll kind of get rolling through, and if there's a lot of acronyms in here, I kind of gave this to the ELI audience, and if anybody has any questions, just speak up and I can run through some things, but I'll try to explain a lot of it as I go. So Good Samaritan role in abandoned mine land work under CERCLA, or the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act, or Superfund. per past and recent guidance, a Good Samaritan organization like Trout Unlimited is a person or entity voluntarily up contamination at an orphan mine site under CERCLA, and they are not a past or current owner or operator of the portion of the site impacted by releases of hazardous substances. Hazardous substances being those contaminated mine waste that you see in the photo to the right. That Good Sam also had no role in causing the release of hazardous substances or existing contamination at the site, or do they have affiliation with someone who did, and they are not potentially liable under any federal, state, or tribal local law for remediation, treatment, or control of that existing contamination. So Alex mentioned some point sources in the Arkansas. There has been a lot of work done. Up in Leadville, we've done some recent work this past year. I'll show a couple photos Rick wanted me to share out at the Tiger Mine. But a point source is a draining adit, a treatment discharge, anything single identifiable source that requires a NIPDES permit or a National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit under the Clean Water Act. And then non-point source, which are mine waste piles, anything where one discernible drainage source can't be identified. And this is really what we work on as an organization, what we've been working on for the past 10 to 12 years. Point source treatments can be left for another discussion, but it should be noted that legislative fixes are necessary to be able to take on these types of cleanups because of Clean Water Act suits and third-party suits for attainment of water quality standards. We typically say don't let good be the enemy of perfect, because even if we were to improve water quality 50% and not achieve table value standards, we could still be held liable by a third party for not attaining those. So that is really the crux of taking on some of these point source cleanups for us as a Good Sam. Weighing risks. I think my job these days is just always weighing risk versus reward, taking on some of these projects. Every organization has different goals and objectives and liability concerns. You know, TU is different than the state, which is different than a tribal organization. Some important factors to consider. This is a risk matrix I created a couple years ago. It really kind of dives into, you know, what is the public visibility of your project? Are you working in a Telluride? Are you working in a Bonanza, Colorado, where there's no people? Do you have cooperative downstream landowners, or do you have a landowner that might be calling EPA if you put a little bit of red water in the stream? Complexity, how much engineering support do you need, available budget? And then is this a wet versus a dry site? Again, point versus non-point source. And this matrix also kind of lets you know what Good Sam tool you should be using on each project. And these tools that I speak of, they are agency and ownership dependent. Per 2012 guidance, EPA CERCLA tools are basically a comfort letter or an administrative order on consent. And I'm going to go into the details of these here in a second, but that's basically what we try to get from EPA as we work through these types of projects. BLM and Forest Service action memorandums are issued to approve and conduct the work. And then we also have a voluntary cleanup program through the state brownfields, which could be utilized. And then there's also a bona fide prospective purchaser agreement, which is basically if you are a landowner that buys a mine claim and you want to clean it up, you would want to get a BFPP status to show that you are willing to work with the agencies and you know what you bought. So that's kind of how landowners can protect themselves. So comfort or status letters. This is a letter from the EPA to the Good Sam or to us recognizing our work plan objectives, what we're going to do at the site. It gives us Clean Water Act exemption while work is taking place, not after the fact. And then the mechanism of protection is basically we are doing this project at the direction of the EPA. But there is no binding contract with the EPA with a Good Sam letter. So this is something that we should be using on a really low risk project. It is useful for shielding against claims by states or third parties. And it's less internal legwork by the agencies. You know, everybody's overworked and understaffed these days. And, you know, getting complicated documents through the agencies is not an easy task. And it is a shorter time frame. So the AOC, last year, I'm going to talk about Atlas later in this presentation. TU entered into the first Good Sam ASAOC with the Forest Service that I know of ever. Our organization was able to go through an AOC with the Forest Service for our Atlas mine project outside of Ouray. We've done several of these with EPA that I'll go over, but this is actually an enforceable contract negotiated with the EPA. And it does, again, provide that Clean Water Act exemption while it's taking place. And then there's numerous other protection enforcement bars, covenants not to sue. You know, you can see why I had a lawyer with me whenever I was speaking and why it's kind of typically a part of my day job. But, you know, other notes on this one is there are higher legal fees to negotiate an AOC. And then you sometimes have to pay EPA and their oversight costs, which is kind of one thing that we're pushing back on as an organization. We don't really want to be paying their costs because we didn't create the problem. Other liability protections, just kind of run through quickly. The action memorandum process with the BLM and Forest Service, it's either time critical, which is less than 6 months, or non-time critical, which is over 6 months. A lot of these projects are based on 8 removal factors, which abate, prevent, minimize, stabilize, or mitigate and eliminate the contaminated release of hazardous substances. And then the Good Sam role is we try to advocate for language in these documents to protect us as an organization while doing the cleanup, one being response action contractor, or again, rendering care and advice under the direction of an OSC with the EPA. And then the VCUP program, voluntary cleanup, this is established with the landowners, and they have to really be the driving force on this. So if your landowner kind of wants to take a back seat and doesn't really want to be the figurehead of the project, then that's probably not a mechanism that you really want to go after. And so you are really at the mercy of their schedule for that. So summarizing some Good Sam projects that we've been involved in over the years, AOCs that we've developed starting in 2004. One of the first was between a Good Sam and the EPA was out in Utah with Snowbird at American Fork Canyon. Kerber Creek that you all are aware of down in Villa Grove in the Valley in 2010. And an example for this, cost us about $10,000 in legal fees in 6 months for development to get this AOC in place. And then some photos too, you know, Kerber Creek was heavily mined. This photo was from the early 2000s before we did work at site KC6. And then this was taken in 2013, about 6 years after removal. And Kerber Creek's a great success story that we've had. That stream used to run red, orange in 1985, and now we have a reproducing native brook trout population there. The landowners love it. There is some public fishing up higher, and we're continuing to do work down in that watershed in the headwaters. The Atlas Mine and Mill, which I spoke about earlier in Ouray, that was another AOC with the Forest Service. And then some comfort letters that we've gotten. The Tiger Mine, which the chapter's aware of, you guys have contributed to that project. That was first initiated in 2013. The Mountain Pride Mine project in Breck in 2017. Evans Gulch, which the chapter was a part of, contributed some funds to. We did cleanup there in 2018 in Leadville. And for comparison purposes, this was about $1,000 to $2,000 in legal fees compared to about 10. So, you know, it definitely is more costly to go the AOC route, but can ultimately provide more protection for us as an organization. And several action memoranda over time. And then we have about 5 to 6 Good Sam projects in the next 2 years across the state. So we have a lot going on coming up. And I wanted to do a case study, and I had mentioned Atlas a couple of times outside of Ouray. This project focused on reducing the likelihood of hazardous substances migrating off-site. And reclamation took there's 3 tasks that were composed of the project. We did about 1,700 linear feet of run-on, run-off channels around the site that I'll walk you through. Here, this is really mobile, fine-grained gray tailings that's below the former mill structure. And you can kind of see ponding water here in the spring, and this water would kind of just settle either through the groundwater or run off directly into Snuffles Creek. So we came in and established those run-on, run-off controls on both sides of the reclaimed tailings piles. And then we have a buffer zone on this one of that erosion control mat down there. And then we amended all the waste in place and kind of treated it, that I'll go through here in a second. And then 200 linear feet of Snuffles Creek was actually restored and stabilized. It was really incised, and you can kind of see a lens. I don't know if my cursor works, but you can see a lens of tailings, fluvial tailings here on the right. We came in during the consolidation part of the project and removed all of the waste in the stream bank and put it out of the 100-year floodplain. So we had that delineated. And then we reestablished a bankful bench and transplanted about 15 willow clumps to put them down in the floodplain to help stabilize some of those unconsolidated banks. And then the crux of the project, the main part of it was 4.2 acres of mine waste and tailings consolidation and reclamation and native revegetation. And you can kind of get a grasp of the 9-acre site that we were working with here. The orange tailings in the foreground, you can see. And then you can actually, if you can see my cursor over on the left, there's three little squares. Well, those were actually test plots that we went out there to see what would work and what wouldn't work 2 years before doing the reclamation. So we kind of had a really good idea of what to put in the ground when we came out. This is during reclamation. You can kind of see, this is right after we pulled some stream bank fluvial tailings out. We're consolidating them with the excavator here in the foreground. And then this is after the site was reclaimed, so fully revegetated. Our process for reclamation here was consolidate all the waste into 2 piles, mix in lime and limestone to neutralize the acidic waste, and then add in an organic compost to get some of those nutrients back in the soil along with the fertilizer. We use a 462 that has some biochar, and then native seed, wood straw, and agricultural straw on top, and everything was kind of roughed up to reduce erosion. So this is one of our bigger sites last year. So, you know, just transitioning back into some of these Good Sam projects, I'm not going to go through too much of this stuff, but the one thing I do want to hit on, or the one thing that we've noticed as an organization is we really need a better seat at the
should
table.
Be able to get out of here.
Whenever agencies and we're having those site-specific discussions, we should be treated as a partner as opposed to a responsible party, which is what Circle is really based on. Is, you know, the mining companies are the polluters that caused the problem, but we are Good Sam, so we're here to help. So it has to be a different conversation with us. Again, Clean Water Act is going to be a crux, and then some crucial pieces needed for progress. We need funding and better Clean Water Act protections. And while non-point source projects have been successful, we really need that Clean Water Act protection to do these point source cleanups. And we need a dedicated funding source. And I don't know if you all are aware, but Senator Bennett introduced the Outdoor Restoration Force Act last year, and this really actually has a placeholder in it for abandoned mine cleanup and funding. So this could potentially help us fill a void to do some of these cleanups. And then recent Good Sam legislation, there was a draft bill last year. Senator Gardner was going to spearhead that, but that kind of fell through with the change. So we're now working with Senator Bennett to kind of get this pushed through again, that would focus on a pilot bill where 15 projects would be done in the state of Colorado. And then we would use this as a starting point for legislation with the new Congress. Hopefully the bipartisan support could help us get this bill through this year, along with the Restoration Force Act. And then, you know, this pilot bill would help us prove up the concept of what Good Sam cleanups can do on a federal level. It would help us make more permanent changes to federal law. And these are really 2 crucial things: the funding and the protection. Will make this especially important to get this point source problem taken care of. So, questions, comments?
Boy, that's technical, Jason. You got to have a legal mind to understand a lot of what you're talking about. Talking about good SAM legislation, we've tried that for many, many years, it seems like, and we get close, we don't get it through. So my question to you is, what governing body supersedes a good SAM project? When done in Colorado, you would fall under Colorado state laws or EPA federal jurisdiction? I know that's probably a loaded question.
No, if it's private land, it's EPA. If it's forest, it's forest. If it's BLM, it's BLM.
Okay.
So that they would be the agencies that you're working with on a good SAM project. So like if it's a private site, then we'd be working with EPA to establish a comfort letter and AOC, and they would be approving everything.
Do you think we have a chance of getting something passed here in Colorado
Up on the Snake
with
River
Bennett?
drainage above Keystone.
I hope so. The bipartisanship of the new Congress could be something that we could build momentum on. I think, to your point, Good Sam has come a long way. The legislative attempts in the past, I mean, it went back to Udall and Tipton, and even their predecessors were looking at some of these bills. But we think focusing it down in Colorado might be a way to prove the concept. Not making this a national bill, but trying to prove up the work here in Colorado and show people that we can do it effectively is the way that we're going. So we're hopeful for this year.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever have anyone from national come out and check or look at any of your projects? Sounds
national,
like you're
national
leading,
to you.
Yeah, national. You're probably leading the team and doing it all yourself. Do they come out?
Mostly.
I guess yeah.
I would say mostly it's me, and then we have a couple other folks up in Montana that are doing similar scopes of project work. But there's few national TU staffers that are kind of doing the AML work on the scale that we're doing it.
Would you ever be interested in having a field or site visit with any members of the club to, when you're up there, you're already at a site working where anyone interested could come up and maybe get a little tour or explanation of what you're doing, what TU's doing, the local chapters put money into on any of these projects as they come up?
Absolutely. I mean,
is that a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, we'd love to have folks up. I mean, when we first started doing this work, when I moved out here, ironically enough, to Saguache of all places, about 10 years ago, we were doing a lot of volunteer-based efforts. It was more smaller scale projects, and now there's a lot of heavy equipment involved. I mean, but we would be happy to have chapter out there during some of that dirt moving and some of the work that we do to just kind of show you through the process. And if we have an opportunity to do that, probably the closest one this next year might be out in the Alma area. We'll have a big project, probably about $250,000 going on Forest Service property outside of Alma this year that we could probably connect some folks to. And I know the Cheyenne Mountain chapter, I think, kicked in some money for that because that's in the Platte. But that's one of our more local, bigger projects. And I have another one down in Bonanza, which is about an hour from us in the Basin of the Rio Grande.
Would you let us know when either of those projects is coming to a head and you're out there? And we'll see if anyone's interested. I love this stuff, and I would love to come out.
Yeah,
maybe.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think Reed typed in a question to the bar, who did the work on the Snake River by Keystone? And that would be at the Penn Mine. There was a bulkhead, which is basically like a giant concrete plug that was stuck in an adit to reduce the flows and the contamination coming out of there. And that was a partnership project between EPA and Division of Reclamation, Mining and Safety. DRMS actually installed the bulkhead. I think it was, I'm gonna say 2015 or something. I'd helped sample up there and been involved peripherally on that project doing some work downstream of there. And we actually have a project that we've designed outside of Montezuma that EPA is going to be doing construction on this year. But that project, Reed, was it was EPA and DRMS.
Jason, in the Bonanza you just mentioned, isn't that near the Kerber Creek area? I was out there with my wife a couple weeks ago, drove up to Bonanza. Is that the same place I'm thinking?
You're correct, Larry. Yep, that's headwaters of Kerber Creek, and the project's actually up Raleigh Gulch. So if you go through Bonanza and you leave the town site and you cross the Forest Service boundary, there's the stream that comes in on the right at the Exchequer Cemetery. That's Raleigh Gulch. You follow Raleigh Gulch the whole way up, and that's where we're doing work. The mini Lynch mine is up there, and we've done 3 years of work up there. And you know that's really what started the whole Kerber Creek cleanup was the Assoc project in 1999, which is even past that in Squirrel Creek. So it all ties into Kerber for sure.
Is that
Yeah,
west?
I'd be interested to get involved or get up there and see what's going on when you start doing that.
Yeah, that's a little floodplain restoration and stream restoration and pulling some mine waste back. So I'll be sure to reach out to the chapter when we're doing some of that work down there.
Is that west of Villa Grove?
Yep. You take LL 56 to Villa Grove, and it's about 15, 16 miles up LL 56.
Okay. Never been out there. I'd love to go up.
Jason, what's the major pollution cleanup on the Arkansas? It's the Yak Tunnel, and then what the Bureau Rec did north of Leadville. Who's responsible? I know whoever's responsible for that's like forever and ever, because it's going to have to be treated forever and forever. Who's actually in charge of those two projects now? Could you remember?
It's probably the state that is in head. I'm pretty sure it might be the state, because there's the California Gulch treatment plant, and then there is the Yak Tunnel, but I'm not sure who's managing it right now. I know, for example, like Summitville, which is another super fun site, like up in the headwaters of Alamosa, the state manages that treatment plant. So I would assume it's probably similar for the ARC as well.
Do you know if the Alamosa River is fishable?
No, I wouldn't give it a go. That thing has so much like natural contamination, like natural weathering of acid mine drainage, as well as human caused, that it's pretty dead. They got flow issues too.
The Alamosa River is fishable above. The Alamosa River is fishable above Stunner Campground, where it runs in with Treasure Creek. But you have to go way up fishable.
Yeah. The dilution factor is Stunner coming in. You definitely have to be above Whited and what's that other drainage that comes in there? But yeah, the higher the better in that drainage.
It's actually got that area's got some wonderful Rio Grande cutthroat, native cutthroat fishing up there, up in Treasure Creek, which is a tributary of the Alamosa.
Nice. Well,
any other questions for Jason? Well, this was really interesting. I love this stuff. When you talked about plugging an audit, my mind, Jason, went straight to the Gold King mine when it blew out, above Silverton and drained into the Animas, and that's when I lived in Durango on the Animas, and saw that water, that very polluted water, come through town about 16, 18 hours later.
Yep.
And what was interesting was we were up with the EPA touring that all that work they were doing about a week before it blew, with Peter Butler and Ty Churchill and about 20 of us up there. And then, gosh, amazed at what they're doing, and then turn around, get home, and then boom, they messed with it. I guess the EPA supervisor of that project took vacation, and his workers, as I understand it, if the story's correct, were working in an area too close, unsupervised, and they messed with it enough, and it blew. And boy, then that led to everything that's what's happened since.
Yeah. And that's why we have to go through all these legal hoops to do the projects to protect ourselves because of that Gold King event down there. And it actually, the on-scene coordinator, the manager of that project, I think he went on vacation, and they had a guy come in to replace him that was an acting on-scene coordinator, and he actually made the call to open up the adit, and that's when it happened. So that was his bad. They actually dug into the top of it, which was standard practice, because when you dig into the top of the adit, you're not thinking there's going to be pent up water behind there. It should be all towards the bottom of the adit, but the fact that it was earth and collapsed on itself, all of it just kind of ripped out from the top and eroded the whole thing out and went down into the Animus. So yeah,
so much pressure.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of water backed up. It blew. Yeah, that was terrible.
Rick, getting back to what Chris was talking about, and I was talking about earlier, what actually wiped the stonefly insects out of the Arkansas was the spill we had up out of Leadville, out of California Gulch in the Yak Tunnel in about 86, I think, or so. And that's what wiped out all those invertebrates pretty much all the way down the river, was when that spilled. And so
Yeah.
I'll be real honest and say that spill was probably at least 10 times worse than the one that you had up there in your neck of the woods, because we lost everything.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And they even showed it. I mean, CPW was out there with fish, and they didn't see a really negative effect to macroinvertebrate populations or fish populations in the Animus. It was more of a, the complete eyesore and the shock of that much water going down. But I think you're right, Bill. The yak definitely had a bigger detrimental impact to the Arkansas than did Gold King. It was just so prominent down there that it really, it made national news that day.
I don't know how many people know this, but I actually went back to Washington, D.C. and met with Senator Tim Wirth, who I'd taken down the river several times. And he set up a lunch with me with the guy who was in charge of designated the EPA Superfund sites. And that's how we got that area designated as a Superfund site, and then got the funding for the cleanup. Wirth was
nice.
the main instigator in that.
Thank you,
Well,
Bill.
All right.
Yeah.
Right, Bill.
That's a fishing trip well worth it.
I got pictures on my wall of that meeting with Wirth.
We need an applause button. I know there's one around here. I would hit it if I could find it. Good job, Bill. Tom Arnott and I have seen salmon flies in our neck of the woods about two summers back, but I haven't seen much since. I know there's pockets here and there, I would guess, as Alex alluded to. Sure love to see them take hold. What a major food source or protein source that would be for the trout in our river, to get them past their 13, 14, 15-inch average size up to some serious big monsters. I think they need the real meal deal.
Every
So,
time we come back from a Gunny Gorge
they-
fishing trip and de-rig our stuff, if we find live stoneflies, we run them down to Hecla and drop them off.
I went up to the Madison in my RV one year, and halfway back, first night, Patricia freaks out as we went to the back of the RV and got set up. And that evening, the whole ceiling inside was full of salmon flies that had entered in as we were camped on the river. We had a bunch of them. So I was collecting them in jars and was going to throw them out wherever we were, halfway between Montana and here. I don't remember where that was. And a thought occurred to me. I said, no. tomorrow we'll be home, and we lived on the animals. I'll just turn them loose there, which I did. And about 10 years later, the guides at Wranglers were telling me they were seeing salmon fly hatches happening down south of the river, a ranch south of town, and it's since sold it. So yeah, they're telling me down in your stretch there's salmon flies. So I went, cool, awesome. I don't know how that happened, but yeah, go to the gunny, collect them, and bring them back. I don't know how Alex feels about that transplanting things, but
It'd sure be nice to have them back because they were prolific. I can remember going through Browns Canyon, and my fishermen their arms would just be so sore after a float through there that they couldn't even cast anymore.
Wow. That was when, in the 80s?
Yeah,
Early
85,
80s?
86, right in there. 84 maybe. That's when I first got here.
Yeah. Well, how clean do you think our water is now? I mean, I know we get little surges of metals come through and stuff, but you would think that they would take, that they could survive and take hold and prolificate, but it's not happening. It doesn't sound like, not in big numbers.
That'd be a question for you, Jason. How clean is the water now? I think it comes pretty good out of that reclamation side, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. I mean, they've improved it vastly, and I mean, we haven't really noticed any surges or anything, and that's why we're trying to do work on some of these smaller sites that are remnant from all the historic mining, just to reduce anything from potentially getting, pushed into the river during like a high flow event. So, we haven't seen any spikes in water quality.
Well, the other thing a lot of you guys might not be aware of is back in that same sort of time period, sort of sometime in the mid to late 80s, we Reed sort of organized us to get the first flow program because they were going to drain Twin Lakes, and he convinced them to let that water go in July or August or whenever we needed it. And what they did was they opened it up and you could take out all the fish you wanted, and then they went in and rotenone the lake to get out all the trash fish. But they made a mistake on the amount of rotenone, or didn't figure out the thermoclines or something, and then released water into the Arkansas and killed every fish from Twin Lakes to basically Stone Bridge. Reed probably remembers that. The DOW gave us big nets and black bags, and we went down and fished them all out of the river, and we fished out thousands of fish out of the river. So don't do that, Alex.
I'll try and avoid that.
So just for everyone's information, the Leadville Drainage Tunnel and Treatment Facility is still managed by the Bureau of Reclamation.
Okay, the Bureau Rec.
Yeah, they're still running it.